हेलो डियर स्टूडेंट्स, वेलकम टू गुरुवर्या। दोस्तों, आज के इस सेशन में हम आपके सेकेंड यूनिट में से सेकेंड चैप्टर दैट इज द थ्री क्वेश्चंस उसका वर्कशॉप देखने वाले हैं। तो फिर चलिए समय न गवाते हुए हम आपके वर्कशॉप की ओर बढ़ेंगे। क्वेश्चन फर्स्ट, रीड द स्टोरी एंड आंसर whether the following statements are true or false. Here we have given some statements and we have to state that the given statement is true or false. First statement, the people convinced the king to make a proclamation. Answer, false. Second statement, the hermit spoke usually to everyone. Answer, false. Third statement, the king received all answers from the hermit. Statement is true. After that, next, the person the king saved and helped was his enemy. This is true statement. Last statement, to do good to people is the purpose of our life, and this is a true statement. The words second question match the titles with the contents of the proper paragraph. First, once a certain king important to do, king helps the hermit. Second, many learned people time for everything. The king received various answers. Equally varied none, questions remain unanswered. Fourth, when the king arrived, my first attention, king meets the hermit. After that, the hermit listened, continued to dig. King helps the hermit. The king turned round, gave it to him, the wounded stranger. Afterwards, meanwhile, the son said the king, the stranger begs for pardon. Next, you do not know all my life, stranger's vicious intention. Ninth one, the king was very glad the day before king gains a friend. Lastly, do you not see to send into his life? The hermit points out answers. Afterwards, next question number 3. The character traits of the king and hermit are mixed up. Sort them out in the right box. Here we have given some characters which are mixed by the king and hermit characters. Characters are feeble, helpful, enlightened, impatient, eager to succeed, patient, convincing, wise. Now we will see the characters of the king, that is impatient, eager to succeed and helpful, hermit, feeble, convincing, enlightened and patient. Here we have completed third question. Now we will be moved towards the fourth question. Question 4. Complete the tree diagrams associated with the happenings in the story. Here we have given some tree diagrams and we have to complete it or fulfill it. First, what was the right time for every action? Reward winning questions. First, in reward winning questions, there is a first question, that is, what was the right time for every action? Second, who were the most necessary people? Third, what was the most important thing to do? Next, B, different responses to first question. First, draw up in advance a table of dates, months, and years and live strictly by it. Second, one should always attend to all that is going on and then do what is most essential. Third, impossible for one man to decide correctly the right time for every action, to have a council of wise people. Afterwards, next, most necessary people needed by the king, that is counselor, doctors and priests. And lastly, most important occupations are science, skill in warfare, religious worship. After that, question 5th, write down in your notebook 2 points for each of the following. How do you know? First, the learned advisors who came to the court confused the king. Answer, none of the learned advisors could give satisfactory answers to the king's 3 questions, as all of them had conflicting answers as they were not sure. Second, the king was humble. Answer, we come to know that the king was humbled by the fact that he did not mind doing ordinary work such as digging. He did not use his authority as king to face the hermit to answer his question. Instead, he requested the hermit politely and was ready to go away if the hermit refused to answer his questions. Next, the king's enemy was repentant. Answer, the king's enemy tells him that since the king had saved his life, if he or the king wished it, he would serve him all his life. This shows that he was repentant. Most important occupation, science skill, in warfare religious worship. Afterwards, next, the hermit was truly wise. Answer. I think the hermit somehow knew everything before the king arrived. He must have known about the plan of the king's enemy and so was able to deal with it purposefully when the king arrived. News about the ambush must definitely have come to his ears. Otherwise, he would not have been able to answer King's question in such a real and practical way. He was a hermit, a wise man, and nothing to importance would have escaped in his consideration. Next question number 6. Choose the correct answer and fill in the blanks. Here we have given some options or alternatives and we have to choose the right one. First, varied paragraph 3 means different. Second, many learned people came to court and gave different answers. Next, the synonym of convinced is persuaded. After that, the king wanted to know the time of begin everything right. Next, I pray you to answer my questions. Here, pray means request. After that, choose an adverb that collates with breathe heavily. Here we have completed sixth question. Now we will move towards the seventh question. Question 7. Answer the following questions. In that, first, the learned people were sometimes divided in their opinions, different persons giving quite different answers. At other times, none of them gave an answer. They all suggested ways to look for an answer. Point out one example of each. Answer. To know the right time for every action, draw up in advance a table of days, months, and years and live strictly according to it. The people, the king most needed counselors, the most important occupation, science. Afterwards, next, though the hermit did not say anything to the king for some time, he did not ignore the king or treat him rudely in any way. Do you agree? What evidence of his politeness can you point out? What shows that he listened and responded to king's words? Answer. I agree that though the hermit did not say anything to the king for some time, he did not ignore the king or treat him rudely in any way. His politeness is evident by the fact that he greeted the king by spitting on his hand before he resumed digging. The hermit indicated that the work he is doing was more important and the king would have to wait. Afterwards, next, question C. The hermit spoke only to common people, so the king put on simple clothes. Do you think the king hoped to be mistaken for a common man, or was he just showing that he was a humble person? What shows that the hermit knew him to be the king? Answer. The king put on simple clothes because he did not want the hermit to refuse to answer his questions. The king was aware that the hermit was wise and would know that he was the king and not mistake him for a common person out of humility and respect. The king dressed up as a commoner. We know that the hermit knew that he was the king. By the way, he returned the king's greetings. Afterwards, next, did the king behave as an ordinary person rather than a ruler at hermit's hut? What shows it? Did he also act as a good, kind person? When did he do so? Answer. Like any other ordinary person, the king tended to the wounded man. He even washed the wound and bandaged it many times when required. He brought and gave the man water to drink. The king went out his way to be good and kind to the man. All this happened after the wounded man came running wounded the hermit's hut. Next question. Do you think the hermit knew beforehand not only about king's arrival but about the ambush by his enemy? Think a little about this and say what you really feel. Answer. I think the hermit somehow knew everything before the king arrived. He must have known about the plan of king's enemy, so was able to deal with it purposefully when the king arrived. News about the ambush must definitely have come to his ears. Otherwise, he would not have been able to answer the king's questions in such a real and practical way. He was a hermit, a wise man, and nothing of importance would have escaped his consideration. Afterwards, eighth question, consider this list of different things that happened and rearrange them in the order of time. That is, what happened first, what happened next, and so on. Read the related paragraph again if you are uncertain. The given sequence is the bearded man resolved to kill the man. The king went alone to see the hermit. The king executed the bearded man's brother. The king spent the night at the hermit's hut. The bearded man led on ambush to kill the king. The king's bodyguards recognized and wounded the bearded man. The bearded man came out of the ambush. Proper sequences. The king went alone to see the hermit. Secondly, the king spent the night at the hermit's hut. Third, the king executed the bearded man's brother. Fourth, the bearded man resolved to kill the king. Fifth, the bearded man led an ambush to kill the king. Afterwards, the king's bodyguards recognized and wounded the bearded man. The bearded man came out of the ambush. Afterwards, next question, question number 9. Read the story in your own language. Summarize the following aspects of the story in 4 to 5 lines each in your own language. Write it in your notebook. First, king's problem. Answer. The king felt that if he knew the right time to begin anything, the right people to listen to or avoid, and the right occupation to take up, he would be able to rule his kingdom well. Second, attempts made to find a solution. Answer. The king made a proclamation of rewarding handsomely those who would answer his questions. Unsatisfied by the answer he received, he visited renowned wise hermit convinced he would get his answers from him. What is the climax? The king finally goes out to meet the hermit one last time after making peace with his enemy who had come there with the intention of killing him. This is when the hermit speaks to the king and points out that the king already had the answers to his questions. He proceeds to explain what he means thereafter. Next, solution. The king got his answers through all that he experienced throughout the day with the hermit. The actions and wisdom of the hermit gave the answers to king's questions. The most important time is now. The most important person is the one you are with at that point in time and doing good for the person who is with you in the most important work were the answers that he found with the hermit's help. Afterwards, message. You have been sent into his word to do good deeds. So do all the good you can to everyone around you. Love others as you would expect others to love you. Become love is the best of human existence. Do all the good you can by all the means you can in all the ways you can in all the places you can to all the people you can as long as you can. The words 10th question 10a. The following compound words from the story are split in the jumbled order. Rearrange the letters to make a meaningful word. Firstly, undertake, next anyone, time pass, bodyguard, warfare, beforehand, meanwhile, and everything. These are the words which are made from these sequences. Afterwards, next B. From the story, find the collocation of the following. Most important, join intently, frail and weak, widely renowned, right time, warm blood, simple clothes, eyes closed, fell asleep, melt peace. Next question, question number 11. Say whether the verbs underlined in sentences or infinite are finite, limited by the number of a person of the subject, or finite or non-finite, that is not governed by the subject, number, or person. First, he decided to go to a hermit, finite, non-finite. I have come to you, which hermit, finite. He gave the reward to none, finite. The hermit was digging the ground, finite. I pray you to answer my question. This is non-finite. Afterwards, forgive me which is finite, and lastly, the sun began to sink. This is non-finite. Next question, question number 12. Narrate an experience of your own that has helped you to realize the patience is bitter, but its fruits its sweet. Write in your notebook in about 20 lines. Answer: patience is bitter, but its fruit is sweet. It was Rousseau, a philosopher from Genoa, Switzerland, who said patience is bitter, but its fruit is sweet. I realized that the truth of the statement when I was in 10, it was an important year for me. My school was far away from my home, so where my classes, I had to spend a lot of time walking in order to reach either school or classes. This meant a lot of waste of precious time that I could use very well for study. I was only child of my father had passed away 4 years ago. My mother would tell me how patience things will work out, but I really could not understand. The rainy months passed by with me studying an auxiliary school or to the class. If I was lucky, someone would give me lift. My studies were suffering. I was lagging behind in keeping up with homework and revision. Then one day postman delivered a letter. Mother read it in excitement. You know what? There is a good news. Your uncle from US is coming to visit us. He's your dad's brother and last time he saw you when you were a baby. Oh, said, wondering how that could be good for us. On the contrary, I would have to take my uncle visiting and would take up more of time I required for the earnest study. The day I arrived, my uncle came over, a jolly fellow, full of stories and fun and small delightful gifts. In the afternoon, I took his leave, saying I had to go to school and then classes. How are you going? He said. I put my head down and said, walking. Come, I will take you to auto rickshaw, he said. And so we went at it. It's a quiet distance. Well committed. I nodded silently. The evening when I came home, I could not believe my eyes. There, resting against the wall, was the most beautiful bicycle I had ever seen. Mother and my uncle came out to greet me. This first boy, no more walking long distance for you. Tears welled up in my eyes, and I ran and hugged my uncle. Thank you so much, I said. Indeed, my patience had been rewarded with sweet fruit. Afterwards, next question 13. After reading the story, develop a dialogue with two of your classmates about the characters of the story besides the tactful introduction to the conversion and write it to 10 sets of dialogue. Myself, hey, did you like the story? Three questions. Student first. Yes, I was particularly impressed with the king. He was very humble and he was eager to know more about life. Myself, yes, he did not imagine that he knew everything just because he was king. Student second, I liked the hermit. He was quite a cool character. Myself, he was a very wise. He knew beforehand that the king would come to him. He also knew the solution to the king's problem even before the incidents occurred. Afterwards, student first, yes, and the surprising thing is that the king indirectly got the answers to his questions from long forgotten enemy. Myself, the story is very cleverly written, woven around these three characters. One seeks answers to questions, one knows the answers to the questions, one is the medium through which the answer is given. Student second, if the king's bodyguard had not attacked the man, he would not have come to Hermit's hut to meet the king. Myself, if the man had not been wounded, the king had not bound with his wounds and saved his life. Man would not have forgiven him for a cruel wrongdoing in the past. Afterwards, next student first. Yes, Leo Tolstoy wanted to give us a message of forgiveness and doing well even to our enemies. Through the three characters in the story and their interactions, the writer brought out his message very well. Myself, indeed a well written story and one from which we learn such a lot of. Afterwards, 14 question from the library or internet. Read the story How Much Land Does a Man Need by Leo Tolstoy and write a review of the same covering the following points. Background of the story. Leo Tolstoy wrote How Much Land Does a Man Need against backdrop of massive changes in the 19th century in Russia. Until the emancipation of Russian serfs by Caesar Alexander II, the peasants were virtual slaves and landowners, aristocrats. Tolstoy wrote this story after the serfs had already got their freedom for 25 years. They now had rights and their own land. There was progress among the peasants, but Tolstoy was apprehensive about whether the peasants' progress brought changes they would regret. The stories bring a harsh warning of unchecked materialism, which is clearly established through the fate of Fanon, the protagonistic of the story, and his sad, untimely death. Characters are Phenom, the protagonistic, his wife, his sister-in-law, the Bakshirs, Bakshkirs, and the devil. Plot or theme: Phenom, a Russian peasant, overhears his wife and his sister having an argument over whether it is better to live in a country or the city. This land farm Paham to make the dangerous declaration that if he had just enough land, he would not even fear the devil. The devil hears this boast and decides to put this to the test and exploits the greed of Paham. The story relates to Paham's success in buying land and also his dissatisfaction. After that climax, what is the climax? Paham comes to know about Bashkir's region where very fertile land can be purchased very cheaply. The Bashkirs agreed to sell him for 1000 rubles, as much as land he can pass off in a day as long. He returns before the end of the day to the starting point. Sam walks far, trying to get much land as possible. But when he sees more fertile land ahead of him, greed overtakes his sense and he keeps walking further away without realizing it would be difficult for him to return to the starting point. In his rush to get back to the starting point, he succeeded. He collapsed and dies. When he dies, the Bakshins ask Pheom servants to bury him on the same land, and he ends up with 6 feet of land, enough to bury him instead of the land that he had acquired. Message or a moral. The story tells us about destructive consequences of human ambition and greed. The message is clear: a warning against biting off more than you can chew. The story shows us how human nature pushes us to want more and more. We are never content, no more how well off we may be. While trying to improve our standard of living, we put ourselves in danger of ending up with nothing. It gives us message how greed and excessive desire for earthly desires can destroy a person. Here we have completed the workshop. I know the workshop was very large, but you have to write these all questions which are very important and compulsory questions. आई होप आपको यह सेशन अच्छे तरह से समझ में आया होगा। अगर आपको इस सेशन में कोई भी प्रॉब्लम हो, डाउट हो, तो कमेंट कीजिए। इसी तरह से इस चैप्टर से रिलेटेड जो बाकी के वीडियोस है, मतलब वार्मिंग अप का वीडियो, मार्जिन क्वेश्चन का वीडियो, चैप्टर का वीडियो देखने के लिए हमारे चैनल को सब्सक्राइब कीजिए, बाजू में दिख रहे बेल आइकन पे क्लिक कीजिए और वहां पे ऑल कीजिए ताकि आपको वीडियो के बारे में सभी नोटिफिकेशन मिलते रहे। इसी तरह से सभी क्लास के सभी सब्जेक्ट के वीडियोस एक ही जगह पे देखने के लिए प्ले स्टोर पे जाइए, गुरुवरिया एकेडमी सर्च कीजिए और हमारा ये एप्लीकेशन इंस्टॉल कीजिए। ये एप्लीकेशन सबके लिए बिल्कुल फ्री है। एप्लीकेशन इंस्टॉल करते समय अगर आपको कोई भी प्रॉब्लम हो तो हमारा जो ऑफिशियल नंबर है उस पर आप मैसेज कर सकते हैं। इस एप्लीकेशन के लिंक आपको इस वीडियो के डिस्क्रिप्शन बॉक्स में मिलेंगे, वहां पे भी जाके आप ये एप्लीकेशन इंस्टॉल कर सकते हो। हमारे कुछ सोशल मीडिया अकाउंट्स हैं, उनके भी लिंक्स आपको इसी वीडियो के डिस्क्रिप्शन बॉक्स में मिलेंगे, वहां पे भी जाके आप ज्वाइन हो सकते हो। तो इस एप्लीकेशन में हमने 4 सेक्शन दिया है जिसके भीतर आप आपके डाउट्स आपके जो अदर क्लासमेट्स हैं उनके साथ मिलकर ग्रुप डिस्कशन करके सॉल्व कर सकते हो। वहां पे हमारे टीचर भी है, उनके साथ भी मिलके आप ग्रुप डिस्कशन करके सॉल्व कर सकते हो। आज के इस सेशन में हम यही रुकेंगे, जल्दी मिलेंगे अगले सेशन में। तब तक के लिए बाय दोस्तों, टेक केयर।